Back in the day, I used to work at Sears. This is when they were doing really well and had tons of stores. If anybody doesn't remember Sears, they were a large department store that sold many things like appliances and clothes. It's mostly gone out of business in recent years though. But when I worked there, we would get lots of people in the store. Well, one time I was working a long day in December. With it being around Christmas time, there were lots of people shopping for gifts and stuff. It was also a weekend, so that added to it. I worked basically all day and I saw countless people. When I was finally off of work, I was happy to go home and was tired. So I just remember that I clocked out of work and then left the store. I went out to my car and then drove back home. It took maybe 15 minutes or so to get back. Then I parked my car in the driveway and got out of it. However, as I was walking up to my front door, I heard a car coming down the street, which was usually very quiet. I noticed it but didn't really think that much of it at all, and I kept going. However, as I was opening my door to go inside, I happened to hear the car slowing down. I looked over to see that the car was starting to pull over to the side of the street in front of my house. So I stopped and I kept watching it because I wanted to see what this car was doing. I did not recognize the car as a neighbor or anybody that I knew. The car pulled over and came to a stop just in front of my mailbox. Then the driver's window rolled down a little and I saw somebody open up my mailbox and then put something inside of it. I couldn't really tell who the person was from where I was. I think it was a man, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyways, I didn't really know what this person was doing or what they had put in my mailbox. After that, they rolled their window back up and then they drove away. I went back outside and after seeing that the car was out of my sight, I walked down to my mailbox. I opened it and I looked inside to see an unmarked envelope. I brought it inside. When I opened up the envelope, there were several Polaroid pictures in it. They were all pictures of me. The first were me working at Sears earlier that day when I was at the registers working as a cashier. I had not known that any of these photos were taken. They were taken at a distance too, so it was not obvious to me and I never noticed it. There was then a photo of me walking in the store, I think when I went on my break. And the last photo was of me walking out to my car in the parking lot after work. This was clearly taken from inside of a car that was also in the parking lot. I hadn't noticed any of them. Of course, I was very freaked out by this. I didn't know what to do about it or anything. I didn't go to the police or report it, but I did tell my friends as well as coworkers. They were all just as confused as I was. The rest of my time working at Sears, I didn't notice anything else like that, and I never saw that car at my house again. I'm not sure where the pictures are. I think I still have them somewhere, but I couldn't find them. It's been so long. But I'd still like to know why that person did that. Was it just an elaborate prank? Why would they choose me though? And they must have followed me home without me noticing. It's all very strange. This happened when I was in high school. It was the summertime, and I think that I was about 15 or so. So I was home alone because both my parents had work, and my older sister also worked. I was too young to have a job, so I just stayed home and played video games on most days. That's what I was doing on one morning when I heard a knock on the door. When I heard a knock on the front door. I never liked to answer the door. I didn't know who it was, but I figured it to be a salesman or something. I didn't even bother to get up. Whoever was at the door knocked again one more time. I just ignored it and kept playing video games. I hoped that they would go away, and after that second time, they stopped knocking. I figured that they were gone, so I never left my bedroom. So I continued gaming, and I quickly forgot about it. It was maybe 1 or 2 hours later when I heard a knocking at the front door again. I figured that the same person was back, but I still didn't know who it was. This time though, I figured that I better get up and see. Plus, I was curious if they were going to be knocking on the door multiple times a day. So I left my bedroom and I walked over towards the door. I saw some random guy standing there and I had no idea who he was, but I still didn't want to answer the door. He didn't seem to notice me, so I quickly went away. I went back to my bedroom and then just hoped that the guy would realize nobody was going to answer the door. I didn't know what he wanted, but I didn't really care either. The knocking stopped and I figured that he was gone again. Moments later, the home phone rang. I didn't know if it would be my parents or something, so I got up to answer it. When I arrived at the phone, I picked it up and said hello. I heard a man's voice on the other end who I did not recognize. He said, "Answer the door," and then he hung up. I was really freaked out now. I went over to a window and looked out and saw that that same man was still standing there. I figured he had to be the one who just called. This was really strange, but it didn't make me want to answer the door anymore. In fact, it made me want to answer the door even less. A lot less. I went back into my bedroom and tried to just ignore it all.
After that, I didn't hear any more knocking. Sometime later, I got up and checked out the window again, and the guy was not there anymore. I was glad that he was gone and hoped that he wouldn't come back. For the rest of that day, there was no more knocking. Soon my sister and parents got home from their jobs. I remember that later that night, my parents and I were in the living room. My dad noticed out the window there was a car parked on the side of the street. It was across the street, but sort of in front of our house. It was really rare to see cars parked on the street like that in our neighborhood. My dad said to my mom how it was strange. Then I remembered everything that happened, and I told my parents about it. My dad decided to go and see the car. All the lights were off, and we couldn't tell if anybody was inside of it, but I think we all figured that it was vacant. So my dad left the house and went outside. When he did, he had made it no more than 10 steps into the yard when the car suddenly started up. Then it quickly pulled away, driving off. It was definitely very suspicious, all right. After that, there was never any more knocking on the door when I was home alone.
This happened when I was about 10 or 11, camping with my mom near a river in the woods. It was just the two of us out there, no one else around. The nearest farmhouse was a couple of miles away, but we were mostly alone. We had the tent set up and a small campfire going, when a little before dark, this man arrived to our site. The area we were in was open to anyone wanting to camp, so it wasn't strange to see somebody else, but he had no gear with him at all. He made conversation with us, and eventually came around to warning us that there were wild dogs in the area that we needed to watch out for. My mom and I were slightly uncomfortable because he didn't leave and said that he would stay at the campsite a while to protect us from the wild dogs. My mom hinted several times that we would be fine and that he was free to leave because we didn't need his protection. But he didn't leave. He stayed a long time, but there wasn't much we could do because it was a public campsite. He had the right to be there if he wanted, even though he had no camping stuff with him. Eventually, my mom told the man that we were going into our tent for the night, thanked him for keeping us company, and said that he could leave and we would be fine. I asked my mom quietly if he was going to hurt us, and she said of course not, but I could tell by the way her voice cracked that she was scared too. We didn't want to provoke him, but we didn't want to make him feel like we were scared either, so we just crawled into our tent while the man kept sitting on a log at the fire pit. I don't think my mom slept that night, as she had a knife close to where she lay in the tent. I watched the man through the flap in the tent for a while. At one point, while sitting by the fire, he pulled out a long knife and started sharpening it on a stick. He just stared down at the blade and ran it along the stick, making these slow scraping sounds. I asked my mom if he was going to kill us, and she kept saying no, but I could tell that she was worried. She tried not to show it, but she was prepared for the worst. I eventually fell asleep, but woke up a lot to see my mom was still awake, lying there and listening to the scraping sound of the knife on the stick. By morning, the guy was gone. I wasn't sure how long he had stayed or when he left. After packing up our gear, we stopped by the nearest farmhouse to tell somebody about the strange man. At the farmhouse, the old man there listened to our story, then kind of chuckled and said, "Oh, that's just Ivan. He means well, just doesn't know how to mind his own business." Apparently, he lived on a farm nearby, and the old man promised us that he'd have another word with his neighbor, reminding him not to be so rude and strange. A few years later, after our camping trip where we had met Ivan, I saw something disturbing. I was watching the news, and a man had been arrested who was a suspect in several missing person cases. They showed his photo on TV, and even though it had been a few years ago, I instantly noticed it was the guy who had been with us at the campsite. His name was Ivan Milat, a serial killer who had been picking up hitchhikers along the highways and killing them, and burying their bodies in the woods right across the river from where we had camped. I can't even describe the way I felt when I realized it. The guy who had been lurking outside our tent, sharpening a knife, talking about wild dogs, had been a serial killer. We had come so close to him, and I had no idea at the time. I don't think I'll ever forget that night and how lucky we were, but it still haunts me. I'm one of those people that's always getting a new phone. I get one almost every year. For me, it's just a personal preference. A lot of times, I trade in my old phone for a new one, but that's not always the case. I happened to just buy a new iPhone a while back, but I still had my old one, so I decided to sell it on Facebook Marketplace. The phone was still pretty new, and I figured that somebody would want it. I listed it for a reasonable price, and within a day, someone had made me an offer. I sold it to them, and after receiving payment, I shipped it to the buyer, which was a man named Elliot. Now, everything seems normal, and it was. He got the phone, and I thought that was the end of that. But maybe like a week later, I got a friend request on Facebook from Elliot, the buyer of the phone. I didn't know him at all, other than that he bought my phone. I clicked on his profile, and I knew that he lived in the same state, in a city that was like an hour or two away. When I clicked on his profile though, there wasn't all that much information because we weren't friends. I thought that it was kind of weird though, so I declined his request. The next day, he sent me a message. He asked me why I declined his request and said that he really wanted to be friends with me. I told him, I just sold you the phone. I don't know you at all other than that. Please don't take it personally. I just don't know you. He kept sending me messages though. He called me some things that I will not repeat here, and he seemed pretty angry. At that point, I blocked him. It was really strange to say the least, but I thought that was the end of it. Now, Elliot did not contact me through Facebook or any other social media for that matter after that. What he did was much worse. The next night, a few hours after I had gotten home from work, there was a knock on the front door. I walked over to the front of my house and looked out the window to see what looked like Elliot standing there. I couldn't believe that he was actually at my house. I never would have guessed that he would have done that. When I saw this, I jumped back and walked away from the door. He knocked again. There was no way that I was answering the door. This guy had to be insane. I heard him yell that he knew I was home from the other side of the door. I'm not sure how he knew that. Maybe he heard me walking when I went by the door. I didn't think that he saw me when I looked out of the window. Still, I wasn't going to answer it. Instead, I called the police. I told them that a man who I had met on Facebook showed up at my house unannounced and uninvited and would not leave. I was told that somebody would be there shortly, and the police got there much faster than I expected. Elliot basically stayed on my front step. He didn't try to force entry, but he sure wasn't leaving. When the police got there, they talked to him, and then they talked to me as well. Eventually, they got Elliot to leave and told him that if he came back, he would be arrested. He agreed not to come back, and luckily, he kept his word. I haven't seen him or been contacted by him since then. I still can't believe that he did that though.
Something really creepy happened to me last month. I live in an apartment building. It's pretty standard for the most part. The place is nice and most of the residents seem nice as well. It's not a dumpy place or anything, but it's not the greatest in the world either. I've lived here for almost 2 years and it's been good. There's a mailroom just inside the doors on the first floor where we get packages and stuff. I order things online all the time, and I have an Amazon Prime account that I use a lot. It's very convenient because you can get next day delivery sometimes. I remember that my coffee maker broke one day and I decided to order a new one. I drink coffee quite a bit, especially in the mornings before work. So I found one on Amazon for next day delivery. I saw when I was at work the next day that it had been delivered, and I went down to the mailroom when I got back home from work. However, when I arrived in the mailroom, I couldn't find my package. There's usually a lot of packages in the mailroom, but I looked at each and every one of them, and mine was not there. I didn't know if somebody had took it by mistake or what, because it said that it had been delivered. So I went back up to my apartment, and I was going on Amazon trying to figure out how to get my money back or something. Then, suddenly, there was a knock on my door. This was nighttime, so I didn't know who could be there. I got up and walked over to the door and looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. I opened up the door out of curiosity. There, sitting on the ground, was my coffee maker. I picked it up and was just so confused. I brought it inside and saw that the box was already open. The coffee maker was inside of it, but I had no clue why it was left on my doorstep now. After thinking about it for a while, the only thing I could think of was that somebody else took it by mistake. Maybe they thought it was theirs and opened it and then realized that it wasn't theirs. I really didn't know. That didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, but I couldn't think of any other logical explanation. I also didn't know who had done it. I decided not to contact Amazon or anything. I figured this was just a freak thing and it wouldn't happen again. And at the end of the day, I had gotten my coffee maker like I had ordered. After a few days, I pretty much forgot about it. I used the coffee maker and it worked fine and everything. Well, sometime the next week, I ordered something on Amazon again. This time, it was skincare stuff. I went down to the mailroom to get the package when I got home from work again. It said that it was delivered. So when I looked in the mailroom, once more, I could not find it. When I looked at every package there and none of them had my name on it, I remembered back to the last time. I thought to myself, this better not have happened again. I went back up to my apartment and really did not know what to do. Sure enough though, later on in the night there was a knock at my door. I quickly went over to it and opened it. Whoever had knocked was gone, but my skincare products were also not outside the door. Instead, there was a note there. I picked it up and read it. It said, "To get your package, come to 112. That was the number of another unit on my floor. I didn't know all my neighbors or who exactly lived in 112, but I now knew who was stealing my packages. I did not go to the room to get it. Instead, I reported it to management of the apartment building. They ended up investigating by looking at the security footage. A guy who I had seen around a few times but never spoke to was the culprit. It showed him taking both my packages back to his apartment, then putting the things on my front step. He ended up getting evicted for it. Why he did that, I don't know." I have a horror story from Snapchat that happened just last year. I use Snapchat quite a bit and communicate with friends on there a lot. I post stories pretty frequently as well. I've had Snapchat for almost 10 years and over time have accumulated lots of friends on the app. When I post a story, sometimes friends will reply to them and say whatever. Now, starting last year, every time I posted a story, this one guy would seem to reply to it. I didn't really know who he was, but his name on Snapchat was Dave. I don't have any idea when exactly he added me or anything, but he would say things that were sort of creepy. Like one, for example, that stood out was when I posted a picture of my new apartment. The picture was just of like the living room and kitchen. He responded saying, "I wish I knew where you lived." It was almost like he was trying to be weird. I never bothered to delete him or anything because I didn't think it was too much of a problem. He never snapped me outside of responding to my stories, but eventually I got tired of it and deleted him. I didn't really think anything of it after doing so. But the next day, a new account added me on Snapchat. I didn't know that it was him making another account. I added him back out of curiosity because I had no idea who it was. Then, he sent me a snap asking why I deleted him. I then realized who it was and then deleted that account. Not too long after that, he tried to add me again with another one, but I did not add him back. He was using different usernames, but I knew that it was still him. The very next day, I got a text on my phone from a number that I did not recognize. It just said, "Hi," and I asked who it was. It took until like the third text for me to realize that it was the same guy. He started cursing me out, calling me terrible things, and was clearly very angry how I kept ignoring him. I blocked the number after he sent me about 20 texts in the span of 2 minutes. However, this couldn't stop him either. As most of you know, there are apps and websites where you can get new phone numbers for free. I've really never used one, but I know that they exist. I'm guessing that's what this guy was doing, because I got another text a while later. It was very clearly still him. I blocked this number too. Then, a while later, there was another new number. This time, though, he left a voicemail. I listened to it, and the man sounded much older than me. He basically called me every name in the book and then threatened me. I blocked his number. This continued for several days. I tried to ignore it as best as I could and just kept blocking his numbers. Soon, though, I decided to get a new phone. I sort of needed one anyways and decided to get a new number as well. I also changed my Snapchat username. After that, I never heard from the guy again. Hopefully it stays that way. I live alone in a house and have lived here for 2 years now. This is an event that took place several months back and is still very fresh in my memory. So it was nighttime and I was alone in my house and in my bedroom. The house is not very large and my room is on the ground level. As I was watching TV and sitting on my bed, it was starting to get late and was maybe 11 or 12. Because it was late, things were very quiet aside from the volume on my TV, which was not that loud. All of a sudden, I heard this noise from the back end of my house. It sounded like maybe from the backyard, and it seemed like somebody had hit a back window. Before I could compute what was going on in my head though, I heard glass breaking. The sound was coming from the same area. Then I knew that somebody was breaking in. My first reaction at that point was to run to my bedroom door and lock it, which I did. I heard whoever had gotten in the house was still at the back side of it. Then my next course of action was to dial 911. I went over and located my phone, which was also on my bed. I quickly scrambled to dial for the police. Then I went to the back corner of my room. As soon as someone answered the phone, I said that my house was being broken into. I gave my address, but I spoke as quietly as I could. I didn't really hear anything during that time as far as where the intruder was, but maybe 30 seconds later, I heard the footsteps approaching the hallway where my bedroom is. Then, moments later, they arrived right outside my door. I muted the phone and tossed it aside in a panic. I didn't want them to hear me. Then, the intruder tried opening my bedroom door. That got me really scared because I had hoped that maybe they wouldn't want to be seen. I felt like they knew I was in here, but possibly they just wanted to see what was in the room. Maybe they just wanted to steal stuff. But now they were coming straight for me. After the door did not open from being locked, I heard a loud man's voice. He yelled for me to open the door now. It was very angry, and of course, I was not going to do that. After a few seconds, he banged on the door very hard 2 times. At that point, I just wanted to get out of there. I debated trying to open my bedroom window and jump out of it, or I could look around and see if I had anything to use as a weapon. I didn't really have much of anything though. I was heading over to the window and the guy started to walk away. Then I stopped. If he was leaving, I didn't want to run into him out of the house. I wasn't sure where he was going though or what he was doing, but I was just moving off of instincts at that point. My mind barely was even thinking at all. I don't even know how long this went on, but I was basically just pacing around and listening for the man. I didn't really hear much though. After I have no idea how long, I heard my back door opening. Then, probably like 30 seconds to a minute later, I heard noises out front. I still thought that it was the man, but it was actually the police. They came inside and I finally left my room. After searching the house, the man had left out the back door just a short time earlier. Some other cops searched the neighborhood and were able to find the man. He was caught just a block away, which made me feel 100 times better. I didn't know who he was or why he chose to break into my house. I'm really glad that my bedroom door had a lock on it though. If not, I'm not sure what would have happened.
Several years ago, I worked a temporary job as a part-time security guard. It was a job that I was not really qualified for, but I guess there wasn't really any requirements. There was this building in the sort of downtown area of the city that I lived in. The building was a mix of some offices and some other businesses. It went up several stories and connected to other buildings as well. During the day, the building was open and there would be somebody who worked at the main desk. Many people would walk through the building during the day, but at night it was closed, and for some reason they still needed a security guard. I would literally just sit in the desk all night and do nothing. Nobody ever came to the building, and I never had to talk to anyone. I wore a security guard uniform that was similar to a cop's outfit, but I was certainly no cop, not even close. The only training I got really was to call the cops if anything happened. But on the other hand, I could just sit down and go on my phone for hours and get paid for it. I could play games and watch YouTube videos and do whatever I wanted really. I would also walk around the lobby area and some of the connecting hallways to get my steps in. I didn't mind the job much because it was just part-time, so it didn't really get old. Anyways, one night I was working and by this point it was probably after midnight. I know that I was at my desk like usual when somebody knocked on the door. This was something that had never happened before. There were 2 glass doors that were at the main entrance. Obviously they were locked now. I wasn't really sure why somebody would be knocking on the doors, but I felt like it was my job to go and check. They also tried to open the doors as I got up, so I walked over to see who was there. When I arrived, I saw a relatively young woman standing there outside. It was a fairly cold night and a little rainy as well. By this time, really nobody else was out walking on the sidewalks or streets. When I got to the door, she was motioning for me to open it. I knew that I was to never let anybody in the building after close, so I tried to tell her through the glass that we were closed and she could not come in. She didn't seem to get it though and motioned that she could not hear me and for me to open the door again. So reluctantly, I did. I opened the door just a small amount and I told the woman that the building was closed. She said something like she was very cold and needed to use the restroom quick. I told her that the building was off limits and I gave her directions to a building nearby that was actually open. She did not seem satisfied, but accepted what I said and started to walk away.
Then I closed the door and went back over to my desk. That was the first time that anybody had ever come to the door while I was working. In fact, it was the first time that I had ever interacted with anybody at the job. However, not more than 20 minutes later, I heard a knocking at the door again. This was really weird, but then I figured that it was probably the same woman there again for some reason. I walked over and saw that there was now a man standing right outside the door. He had a hooded sweater on, but that didn't seem very suspicious because the weather would call for that. The man knocked again and waved me over. I walked over to him, and then without really giving it a second thought, I opened the door a crack. I was going to tell him the same thing that I told the woman. However, literally the second that I opened the door, the man barged his way in, pushing the door into me. Then he pushed me over, knocking me to the ground. Before the door swung back and closed, another man forced his way inside and stepped over me as I was on the ground now. I did not have any weapons, and I wasn't getting paid enough to stand there and fight the guys. So I got up and quickly ran out the door and left the building. The men were now both inside to do who knows what. I ran a safe distance away and I called the police. I walked around the sidewalks freezing cold, hoping that the men didn't come after me or anything. Soon though, the police got there and I flagged them down. 3 cars with a total of 5 officers arrived on scene, and some stayed and talked with me while others entered the building. And thankfully, they were able to apprehend the 2 men who were still inside the building. They also tracked down that same woman who I had talked to earlier. Apparently, she was the getaway driver for the men and was in on it, which made sense. After that, I went back to work, but quit a short time after. That was a little too much action for me. I'm still mad at myself for opening the door and letting the guys in. I had just talked to the woman and that had gone fine though, so I wasn't really thinking. I guess maybe their original plan was to try to get her in the building. When that didn't work, they decided to go in by force. When I was in college during my junior year, I lived in a house with another guy. His name was Sam, and we had met the year prior in a class project. I had a good amount of friends in college, but I wasn't able to find a good living situation, because for a while I didn't know if I was going to be transferring schools or staying. I ended up staying, which I was happy about, but I was kind of late to find a place for the following year. It was pretty much a situation where I would have to live in the dorms again. But then the guy I had a class with kind of randomly asked me if I knew where I was living, and I said no. So he told me that he needed a roommate for a house that he was living in. I pretty much said yes right away. I felt like I had gotten lucky at the situation, and I didn't know Sam very well other than the class that we had together. We had never hung out or anything, but I figured that it would be fine. So the house was pretty small and old, but other than that it was better than the dorms. It had an upstairs with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Then downstairs was another bathroom, a kitchen, living room, and a dining room. After moving in, things started out fine. I didn't really do much with Sam, we mostly kept to ourselves, but I didn't have a problem with him at all, and he was cool. However, several months into living there, some strange things started happening. One night, I remembered that I heard a door keep opening and closing downstairs. It was really weird. It was like it kept opening and then closing right away non-stop. It creeped me out, so I got out of bed and went to look. By the time I got downstairs though, nobody was there. It was so weird. I went back upstairs and Sam's door was closed, so I assumed he was asleep. I didn't know how to explain the noise, but I was able to go back to bed a while later. Now, like a week or so after that, I remember that I was woken up to the sound of somebody knocking on my bedroom door. I thought that it had to be Sam, obviously. After waking up, I asked what he wanted, but he didn't answer me. I got up and went over to the door and opened it, but nobody was there. It was really strange. Then, later on, one time when I was doing homework late at night, I heard footsteps downstairs. I assumed that it was Sam, but then he texted me asking if I was downstairs. When I said no, he said that he heard someone down there. I did as well, and it really creeped me out. So I remember that we both went downstairs and looked all around, but didn't find anyone. It was really strange, and we even considered calling the police, but decided not to. So some really weird things had been happening around the house. I talked with Sam for a while about it, and he claimed that he had heard some strange things too. Then things got even worse. One night I heard a loud banging on my bedroom door. It was like somebody was trying to break the door down. I didn't want to open it, but it wasn't locked or anything. After it stopped, things went quiet for a while. Then I finally went over and looked. When I opened the door, nobody was there. It was very strange how all these weird things were happening. I didn't even want to live in the house anymore. Then, one night shortly after that, I got added on Snapchat by a guy from our school. I knew him because he was friends with Sam, but I wasn't really friends with him. After adding him back, he texted me and asked me if strange things were happening in our house, and I said yes. The guy then told me that it was all Sam. He said that Sam had told him how he pretends to make the house all scary. He said he did that because he thought it was funny and he didn't like me, and he also hoped that I would get scared and move out. Apparently, this guy had had a falling out with Sam for some reason, and they were not friends anymore. So now this guy wanted me to know the truth. He also said that he had even helped Sam once. I think it was the time when we both heard somebody downstairs. Anyways, I was shocked to hear it, and I wasn't sure if I should feel better or worse about this. I decided to confront Sam about it the next day. At first, he denied it, and then he tried to play it off as a joke. We argued briefly, and then we went our separate ways. For the rest of the time that I lived there, I barely spoke to Sam at all, but also nothing else strange happened.
This is something really bizarre that happened to me last winter. I live by myself in a smaller one-story home. The neighborhood that I live in is somewhat typical. However, I know most of the nearby neighbors pretty well and get along with all of them. Last winter, we got a pretty bad snowstorm at one point. It was over a weekend, and it started one night at roughly 5 o'clock. The snow was supposed to last until early the next morning, and we were going to get several inches of it. Everything was normal other than the snowstorm, and I went to bed at about 11 p.m. and then woke up the next morning at probably like 7:30 or 8. My bedroom is at the front side of the house, and as soon as I sat up and looked out of the window, something shocked me. There was a snowman that was built and looking right into my bedroom window. The snowman was very well done and had eyes and a mouth made from buttons. It was probably about 5 feet away from my window. It spooked me at first until I realized what it was. But then, I wondered how it got there. I certainly hadn't made it. It had to have been my next-door neighbor's kids. My next-door neighbors were a husband and wife who had kids in their early teens and middle school ages. They were the only kids in the immediate area of the neighborhood. Still, it seemed kind of unlike them to do that. Why wouldn't they just build it in their own yard? Plus, they were usually well-behaved, and I didn't think that they would even go into my yard without permission. I went outside to snowplow my driveway. When I got out there, I saw my next-door neighbor. His name is Todd, and he was already out using his snowblower. I walked over to him at the end of the driveway and waved. He stopped his snowblower and said that I had a nice snowman in the front yard. I told him that I didn't know how it got there and asked him if his kids had made it. He said no. He told me he had been inside with his kids watching a movie the night before. He assumed that I had made the snowman. We just joked about it after that, though. It was a pretty funny thing, but also a little bit strange. After that, I finished clearing my driveway and went back inside. The temperatures that we were having were in the high 20s all the way up to the mid-30s. This created good snowball or snowman snow. Fast forward to the next morning, I woke up and then went into the kitchen. The kitchen is at the back side of my house, and there's a window out to the backyard. When I looked out of it, there was another snowman. It hadn't been there the day before, and it was facing the back window, looking right at me just a few feet away. Somebody had made another one. This one, like the first, was very well made, but unlike the other one, it had some different props. Instead of just having a face made out of buttons, it had a gardening shovel used as its hand, and it was made to look like it was holding a pitchfork. I realized that the shovel and pitchfork had come from my garage. I went outside and then went to the garage. The back door was left open. Nobody was inside of it though. I was really creeped out now. Somebody was going into my yard in the middle of the night and making snowmen. This time they had entered my garage. I had left the door unlocked by accident, and I made sure to lock it. When whoever it was made a snowman in the front yard, I thought it was funny. But now that it was in the backyard and they went inside of my garage without permission, this was too far. Still, I had no idea who was doing it. At night, I never heard or saw anything. That night, I even looked out of the windows multiple times before going to bed. I didn't see anybody though. The next morning when I got up, both of the snowmen were destroyed. They were just gone and nowhere to be seen. Somebody had tore them down. I was really weirded out by the whole situation. After that, there were no more strange occurrences though. No more snowmen and no more strange things happening.
I still wonder to this day who did that.
It was about a year ago when my parents and sister went out of state for a sports tournament, and I was left alone in the house for 3 days. I'd never been home by myself for that long, and I thought it would be nice to have some peace and quiet. The first night went by without anything out of the ordinary. I watched a couple of movies, made some popcorn, and went to bed around midnight. I didn't think much of it when I woke up in the middle of the night with an uneasy feeling. It was not anything specific, just a weird sense that someone was watching me. I shrugged it off and went back to sleep. The next day, everything seemed fine. I spent most of the time inside, just relaxing and watching more movies. By the evening, the feeling started to creep up again, like there was someone there, even though I was alone. I checked the house to make sure that all the doors and windows were locked, and everything looked normal. I even walked around the yard for a bit to see if anybody was outside, but I didn't find anything. By the time the third night rolled around, I was starting to get a little jumpy. I woke up again between 2 and 3 a.m. and I heard footsteps outside. It wasn't anything loud, just faint footsteps like somebody was walking on the gravel path outside. My heart started to race a bit, but I convinced myself it was probably just an animal, maybe a raccoon or something. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I couldn't fall asleep again, so I grabbed my shoes and flashlight, and I went outside to check things out and ease my mind. I walked around the house, shining the flashlight around, but there was nothing. I was starting to feel stupid about going outside alone in the middle of the night when I heard something from the woods behind the house. It was faint, but it sounded like a branch snapping, like something was walking through the trees. I don't know what made me do it, but I walked towards the sound. As I got about halfway from my house to the edge of the woods, I heard a loud, blood-curdling scream. I don't know if it was an animal or human, but it's a wild area behind my house, and it could have been a fox or a mountain lion. Either way, I freaked out, ran inside, and locked all the doors and windows. I peered through the curtains, trying to see if I could spot anything or anyone. I opened the curtains to a man standing close to the window, staring directly at me. As soon as he saw me, he turned and sprinted towards the woods. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, so I stayed up and watched more movies, and thankfully nothing else happened that night. When my parents came back the next day, I didn't tell them what happened. Since then, I've been home alone 5 more times, and I've never seen the man again. I don't know what he was doing, and if the scream I heard was related to him or not, or just a coincidence from an animal, but it was a scary night. For 1 year when I was in middle school, I did homeschool. It was mostly just online, so it was pretty much like online classes for college, except there wasn't really a teacher. It was all done on this computer program and on the internet. So every day for school, I would just sit in my room at my desk and computer and do school there. Overall, it wasn't too bad, but I didn't really leave the house much. When I wasn't doing school, I would stay on my computer and usually play video games there as well. And the next day, I remember that I did my school again like normal. After that, I played video games, and I remember that I stayed up late playing on my computer after my parents had gone to bed. But during this time, at probably after midnight, I got another email. It was from the same school email that I had received the night prior. This one had no words, but just a photo that was attached. The picture was of my house at night, taken from the street. I was so confused and also creeped out. It was very strange. I looked at the picture for like 5 minutes straight, wondering what was going on. Then I went over and looked out of my bedroom window. I did notice that there was a car parked on the side of the road just past our house. The engine was off, and I couldn't tell if anybody was inside or not because it was too dark, but it usually was not there. Most of the time, cars did not randomly park on the side of our street. I was really freaked out. I went back to the email and just kept looking at it. Then I realized something. This was not the official email address from my school. They had the same name and same logo, but the email for this was 1 letter off, which is why it was hard to see at a glance. This was somebody pretending to be my school. I had no idea who would do this or why though.
It wouldn't be one of my friends messing with me or something like that, because I wasn't even old enough to drive, and neither were any of my friends. This was so strange. I went back over and looked out of the window again. The car was still there. I thought about waking up my parents, but didn't. I went back to the email and blocked the account. Then I just hoped that nothing crazy would happen. I went around the house and made sure that every door was locked, which it was. Then I made sure that every window was completely covered. A few were not, and I covered them. After that, I went back to my room. I checked out of my window again, and the car was still there. After that, I stayed at my computer playing video games to try to get myself to calm down. Eventually, I did. It was probably close to 3 a.m. by the time I was able to fall asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I checked the window, and the car was gone. I also checked my email and did not receive anything else strange. I went around the house, and there was no signs of a break-in or anything, so everything was all good. After that, I wondered about it for a few days, but nothing else happened. I only did that school for that 1 year, and nothing else strange like that ever happened again. I still wonder who did it, and was that car on the street whoever took the picture? I mean, somebody had to know that I did that school program, and then they would have had to pretend to be them to get me to fill out the form for my address. But for what purpose? Just to creep me out with that picture? I'm really glad that nothing else happened. This happened just a couple of months ago. It was the weekend and I was up late watching TV. I was in the living room of my apartment and relaxing after a long day of work. My apartment is not that big. It's basically one giant room with a kitchen at the front by the door and then the living room past that. I think that's a pretty standard setup. Then there's one bathroom and one bedroom off of that down the tiny hallway. So as I sat there feeling relaxed and having an ice-cold drink, I suddenly heard a knock at my apartment door. I didn't know who would possibly be there because I obviously was not expecting anybody. I looked over to the door but did not bother to get up. I figured that it was probably a mistake. Maybe somebody was trying to go to another apartment. After maybe 20 seconds, they knocked again. Then I heard a younger man's voice say, DoorDash. Now, I did not order anything on DoorDash. In my mind, this was a simple mistake. One of my neighbors must have ordered food, and the delivery guy simply had his address mistaken. So I got up from the couch and started walking over to the door. My plan was to just tell the guy that he had the wrong place and to double check the address. When I got to the door, I opened it. But as soon as I did, I saw that there was not just one guy there, but there was 3 men. They were all dressed in dark clothing and had sweatshirts and jackets with hoods up. My door was open for literally half a second, and as soon as I started to open it, I thought better of it and began to close it. The main guy right at the door then went forward and tried to stop me. But he must have realized that he would have gotten the door slammed on his arm because he almost reached in and then didn't. After I slammed my door shut, I very quickly locked it. Pretty much the next second, the guy tried to open the door. Then I heard the other 2 guys get closer. They kept trying to open the door and then they started banging on it and kicking it as well. It was really loud and I thought that the door might break. So I quickly ran into the other room and then I got my phone and dialed 911. But the guys banging and trying to break in did not last long, because within probably a minute, it stopped. Then I heard them all running away down the hallway. I told the police what was going on and they said they would have an officer there shortly. And the cops arrived pretty quick. It was probably within like 5 minutes. However, by that time, the men were all gone. I'm not sure where they went, but they were no longer in the apartment complex. I assumed that it was an attempted robbery, but I don't know why they picked me. My apartment is just like all the others. I'm not rich or anything, so maybe it was just random. I'm just glad that I had fast instincts to close the door as soon as I had opened it, or else I think they might have barged their way in. Last year, I had a pretty creepy experience involving a wrong number, or at least that's what I thought it was. Randomly one time, I got a text from a number that I didn't know, simply saying, "Hey." I wasn't sure who it was, so I said, "Hey, who's this? I don't have this number saved." The person responded saying, "Hey Mark, meet me." My name is not Mark, so I knew that it was a wrong number. I responded saying that I was not Mark and they must have the wrong number. Very soon after, I got another text. They said, "Okay, who are you?" I realized then that it was probably a scam and they were trying to get my information. I heard about some of these sort of text scams and had gotten one once before. Most of the time, if somebody actually has the wrong number, they will just say, "My bad, wrong number," and then not text again. They wouldn't be very interested in you, but only interested in the actual number they're trying to reach. So when they asked who I was, I didn't respond. But surprising to me, they texted again a while later. This time they texted saying, "Answer me." This was strange, but I still thought that it was a scam. I responded and said, "I'm not falling for your scam." I thought then that they wouldn't respond to me, but I was wrong. Just moments after I sent the text, they tried FaceTiming me. At first, I didn't answer it. I thought that it was too weird, and I was not expecting it at all. But after I didn't pick up, when I did, it was hard to see at first who was on the other end. But after looking, it appeared to be somebody who was in a very dark, unfinished basement. I couldn't make out the details of their face because it was too dark and sort of blurry. The quality wasn't the greatest either, but I could tell that it appeared to be a man, and he started talking in an extremely deep voice. The voice did not sound natural, like he was trying to fake it. As he spoke, I couldn't make out any of the words that he was saying either. He was sort of mumbling, and it didn't make any sense. I said nothing because I had no idea what to possibly say. I just sat there watching him in shock. He continued to move around the dark basement and ramble incoherently in that creepy deep voice. He went on for about a minute or two, and I couldn't take it anymore. I ended the call, and then I blocked the number right then and there. It was really strange. After that, I didn't get any other weird texts or calls. Looking back at it now, I still have no clue who that was. I'm not sure why they texted me or called me. It was not the scam like I thought it was. But what was it? I'm still trying to figure that out. This happened a long time ago. Back then, I lived in an apartment by myself. This would have been sometime in the early 2000s. So I was trying to call my friend one night on the home phone in my apartment. I had her number written down and had almost memorized it. My phone was kind of old and I didn't have caller ID or many modern functions. That wasn't a big deal to me though. So anyways, as I was dialing my friend, I must have dialed the wrong number because when the call got picked up, I heard a man's voice. I knew that my friend lived alone like I did. Still, I asked if she was there, and the guy said that nobody by that name lived there. So I said that I was sorry and I must have dialed the wrong number. The man said he understood and it was okay. Then I hung up. I dialed again for my friend, and this time made sure to dial each number correctly. When the call went through, I got my friend and then I started talking to her. We were best friends and we talked on the phone almost every day, many times for hours. So when we were talking, I remember that I heard another call coming in, but I didn't bother to hang up and answer it. I talked with my friend for about an hour and then hung up. After that, it was sometime at night, maybe 9 o'clock or so. I got another call on my phone and picked it up. I heard a man on the other end and realized that it was the same guy who I had accidentally called earlier. He said hi and that he tried to call me before. I told him that the line had been busy. He said that after I called him, I sounded cute and asked if I wanted to go on a date with him sometime. He also said that based on my area code, he figured that we lived in the same city. I realized that the guy must have had caller ID. To me, this did not seem like a good idea. For one, his voice didn't sound very attractive to me, but also for me being a young woman, I didn't think it was smart to go on a random blind date with a guy who I accidentally called the wrong number. I told him that I just didn't want to, and it was nothing personal, but I didn't know him. He tried to convince me, but I really didn't want to, and I was finding it to be increasingly awkward. Finally, the guy said he understood and then hung up. But apparently he did not in fact understand, because he called me back like 10 minutes later. I answered because again, I didn't have caller ID, and I didn't know who it was that was calling me. When I answered the phone, he asked if I had changed my mind yet. I said no, it's been like 10 minutes. He said that he just thought he would ask, and I said, okay, goodbye now, and then I hung up the phone. Then I called my friend again, because I just had to tell her about the crazy thing that had happened. For the rest of the night, the man did not call. The next day, I was at work during the day like usual. I got back to my apartment and was having a normal night with no strange phone calls or anything. But at about 8 o'clock, there was a knock on my apartment door. I didn't know who it would be because I wasn't expecting anyone, and I wasn't thinking about the man in the moment who had called me previously. When I looked through the peephole, I saw a guy standing there. He just had a creepy look to him and gave me a bad feeling, and I'm not just saying that. I had not remembered the phone calls in that moment. I was about to answer the door when I saw the guy reach into his pocket. I was curious, so I kept watching. He took out a cell phone and then started dialing a number. Moments later, my phone rang. That's when I realized who it was. I walked over to my phone, and for some reason, I answered. The guy asked me if I was at home, and I said, "What's it to you?" The man told me to open my front door. That's when I knew for a fact who it was, and I told him to go away. He said that I should go out with him and give him a chance. I told him that if he didn't go away now, I was calling the cops. He got offended and then finally hung up the phone. I went to the peephole again thinking that he had left, but he hadn't. He was still there. Then he loudly banged on the door. I still didn't open it. He yelled at me, demanding that I let him in, but I still wouldn't do it. By this point, I was about to call the cops, but he finally turned and stormed off. That's when I looked out of the door again for a while and made sure that he had gone. And after he was out of sight, I looked out into the hallway just to make sure that he was actually gone. He was. I was extremely creeped out by the guy. I don't know how he knew exactly where I lived. I think that maybe he looked me up in the phone book. It was a very scary experience though.